Hello and welcome to How to Lose Friends in 99 Cards or Less, the show where we build decks that break people. This episode is sponsored by my patrons Bo, Beefcake, and Silky Wilkie. Thank you all for the support. Tonight we're looking at Prossh, my personal favorite bad dragon, because he comes with the ability to create his own entourage. Now while this normally shoehorns him into either an incredibly boring infinite combo, an incredibly expensive aristocrats deck, or an incredibly frail Voltron strategy, tonight we're going to look at how to use those kobolds to bankroll your own Proletariat uprising for the low cost of $36. As much as we would all like to be friends, the only rule zero you can rely on at a commander table is stay strapped or get clapped. So we're going to open up with a death threat in the form of the closest thing this deck has to a combo, Prossh and Devilish Valet. For those of you unfamiliar with Prossh, he makes a 0/1 Kobold for every mana you spent on him when you cast him. That means he doesn't even need to enter the battlefield. Counter spells are fine. As long as you are spending mana, it is more money, more problems for your opponents. Now this gets very interesting when we evolve Devilish Valet, who's a 1/3 whose power doubles every time another creature enters the battlefield. Should Prossh resolve, that's going to be 7, meaning Devilish Valet's power will become 128, and should Prossh not resolve for whatever reason, the 6 kobolds still do, meaning his power is 64, meaning one of your friends is dead. This is easily the most powerful 2-card interaction in the deck and can be flexibly used to either remove the problem player, punish somebody for not letting you know they were stopping by McDonald's on the way to the LGS, or to let that motherfucker Tony know what's up. But that's just a fun one-off. Let's move on to the primary strategy of the deck, which is Glorious Revolution through the power of Lil Beans. Now to make sure we have enough Lil Beans, we're going to bring a few things that aren't Prossh, because even though he can produce them from the command zone, there's always the chance that he gets subdued on the board without being removed, such as via an enchantment, or he gets removed one time too many for our land growth to keep up. So we're going to open with the hardest prank in the entire deck, Tempt with Vengeance. This is an X-cost spell that creates 1/1 red elemental creature tokens and allows your opponents to make them as well. But for every opponent who does, you get that many extra groups of these 1/1 elementals. So if you make 5 and an opponent makes 5, you get 5 additional ones. Most people will let this through because they think that it's food for Prossh, and if they have targeted removal for him, they'll think, oh, it's fine for them to have 10 or 15, but as soon as they know what these are actually for, which is to turn them all into 3/3 or 5/5 red elemental creature tokens, they will never let you do it again, so get it in while you can. This is also the one deck in the world where this is the better Krenko to bring. We do not have other sources of creating goblins, but we have many sources to buff the things that we do have, meaning Krenko will be starting strong and can generate other tokens to add to the Little Bean army. We've also got Fungal Sprouting, just in case we get anything very large, to then make a bunch of additional 1/1s. And last but not least, we have Pylath World Sculptor, because the hills not only have eyes, they have knives. It's very likely that we're going to be getting a large amount of lands on the field in this deck, and if we do, that just adds to our 0/1 army, and if we get any lands on the field after having him out, it adds to our 4/5 army. Now that we know how we're going to achieve a sizable number of Proletariat, we need to worry about how we're going to accomplish our hostile takeover of the board state, which is going to be a little bit tough given that we're using the mathematically shittiest creatures possible. Our kobolds are 0/1s. They deal no damage and die to any instances of damage. And instead of doing anything fancy to get around that, we're going to focus on the Moneyball approach and just try to get on base. For us, getting on base looks like guaranteeing 1 point of damage to our enemies. All of the cards in this section achieve that in some way or another, so we're just going to focus on the highest impact ones, starting with Impact Tremors. This not only doesn't require us to swing to get the damage through, it deals 1 to each opponent for everything that enters. So if we think of a commander game as a 120 health pool that we need to get rid of, when we resolve Prossh once, that's 7 creatures, 1 to each opponent. That is 21 damage on the board, which is phenomenal compared to the 6 instances of 0 damage we would otherwise be swinging. Now, the most expensive card in the deck, and by far the most impactful, is going to be Beastmaster Ascension. Whenever a creature we control attacks, we get a quest counter on it, and it requires you to attack with 7 before giving your entire board +5/+5, but would you look at that, resolving our commander gives us 7 creatures. I highly recommend you keep a copy of the Jungle Book on hand to make people sign in memoriam every time you kill them with this goddamn thing. Next up, we've got Racist Solidarity the card. We're working with a couple different creature types, so this isn't going to go perfectly, but any of our typal token makers are going to make enough of them that at least one person at the table will accuse you of counting this wrong. After that, we've got Death Pit Offering, which looks simple as it's just a +2/+2, but it does require you to sacrifice all creatures you control. And I'm going to be honest with you, this deck is a board wipe player's dream come true, and playing this the turn after they wipe your board is the purest form of vengeance this world offers. We also have the Dragon Throne of Tarkir, which we can put our Dragon Commander in to create a sort of Dragon Human Centipede situation that will give all of our kobolds +5/+5, allowing them to beat somebody to death with the power of irony. The Muruganda petroglyphs and our friend Roger both get honorable mentions for allowing us to count by 2 instead of 1 for getting on base, but those pale in comparison to our final 2 big movers, Oops All Worms and Big Gravy. Hellion Eruption is going to let us replace our board with 4 4s, and they're all going to be Hellions, and Graz is going to let us turn our board into 5/3 Juggernauts, both of which turn our racial solidarity dial up to 11 for shared animosity. Even though our deck is relatively resistant to targeted removal because we have so many unique synergy pieces, there comes a time in every revolution where blood must be shed. And so we're going to honor the sacrifice of our fallen soldiers by profiting from it, or in some cases, just undoing it. Because our board seeks to sprawl out harder than a white man on an airplane, the most effective strategy against us is mass murder, and the most effective counter strategy we have is something like Vat of Rebirth. It's cheap, so it can come down very quickly, and it will allow us to get oil counters from our token creatures dying to return the important non-token ones to the battlefield. In contrast, a very useful pre-board wipe tool is Evolutionary Leap. This allows us to sacrifice a token creature to potentially get a non-token synergy piece. So if you find yourself stalled out with a bunch of kobolds and no backup, this can save you. We also have Regrowth, which, if I'm going to be 100% honest, is a second copy of Devilish Valet. Use it wisely. In a similar vein, we're bringing Victimize, because who wouldn't agree that a 0/1 Kobold token is worth potentially 15 mana of other creatures? We're bringing death-based card draw like Body Count, Fecundity, Death Reap Ritual, and Garna to ensure that should we get board wiped when we have an empty hand, we can reload it to attempt Uprising number 2, Communism Boogaloo. And while Garna provides us card draw if our kobolds die on the offensive, she has the added benefit of ensuring they get on base if they die on defense. But because card draw isn't always enough, we've got Mahadi to turn every dead kobold into a down payment for the next one. And last but not least, because nothing screams fun on a Friday like 3 totally empty board states, we're also bringing the Butcher of Malakir. In spite of all this, the capitalists at your table may resist this glorious new kobold mecha, and so we're going to bring some removal. This package is relatively light because we aim to be the problem, and the most important pieces are Fling and Goblin Bombardment because they give us a way to get rid of Prossh and reset our token creation. Underpinning all of this is our generic card draw and ramp package. Now in this deck, of these 22 cards, almost all of them are leaned towards creating mana and finding lands, because we want Prossh to be like Jesus but better and die multiple times for our sins so that we can have enough kobolds to run over the entire board. For the most part, there are no special pickups here, just cards that cost less than $1 and find us cards or find us mana. The only thing that is particularly applicable to this deck is the final card, Shamanic Revelation. This draws us a card for every creature we control, which in a perfect world is 11,000. It also gives us life for every creature with power 4 or greater we control, which if we've stuck something like Oops All Worms or Graz is also 11,000. The last stop on our tour is our budget Landbase. Now, for the most part, none of these are worth a mention except for Rogue's Passage and Kessig Wolf Run. If you find your back is against the wall, but you still have Prossh, you can use either of these cards to try to force him through for that last little bit of damage. At the time of filming, this deck is $36 on TCG Player and roughly $70 on Card Kingdom. In my testing, it holds up extremely well in more relaxed pods, and it has a puncher's chance in high power, and if nothing else, you can always ruin that motherfucker Tony's day if you get an early Devilish Valet. If you liked videos like this, please consider supporting my Patreon, and have a good night.